we'll go ahead and get things kicked off. Yeah, excited. Another fun episode of Shops Talk. So excited to have Krystal on joining us. For those that are joining for the first time, just to kind of let you know exactly what this episode is and what this whole webinar series is. It's really a good chance to hear from industry experts on the operations side that jump in, share their knowledge, especially today with a topic like purchasing software. I think we're all in that world right now where software is helping us enable all of our teams around us and help us do our jobs better, but there's a lot of it out there. How do we make decisions on even where to start evaluating it and purchasing it? But again, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. But most importantly, we always want to start by thanking our sponsors and partners in this, Salesforce, really enabling us to have this series and get folks from our communities to make sure that, like I said, we can better educate ourselves and share ideas and thoughts. So thanks again to Salesforce for jumping in and helping us. But Krystal, so excited to have you. I'll turn the mic over to you. Let you introduce yourself. Tell us a little about you and where you work and what you do.
My name is Krystal Dial, and I am the Director of Revenue Operations at Capacity. And so essentially what we do is we are a new kind of help desk, and we are powered by AI, and we help automate support for customers and employees. And so for me personally, when it comes to revenue operations, one of my firm belief systems is that business processes are the foundation and business and the firm, the building blocks rather, for just scaling and growing organizations. And so I've been lucky enough to grow my career from a sales development representative to a director of revenue operations within the last 5 years. And so when I am not working, I am getting my MBA right now. I've got two little girls, married, and I'm also teaching myself how to play piano. So lots going on.
Oh, I love it. You definitely have. I'd say your hands are full, but it's all stuff that you enjoy and
Yes,
that you're excited about, which is
definitely.
all that matters. Good. Well, like I said, we're excited about this topic specifically. Honestly, we all live in a world so enabled and powered by software. But some of the hardest decisions we have to make is evaluating them, knowing which ones are right for us. How do we go fight for budget? So it's a lot of things like that we're going to dive into today. But before we get too far down the road, obviously we want to hear from everybody on the webinar. Are you even evaluating software right now? Is that something on your roadmap, on your radar? So we're going to drop a quick poll, launching it as we speak. And so you can definitely jump in and let us know. Are you purchasing any technology this year? Yes, no, hopefully. It's interesting. I think we're all in that world right now where we've been in and out for about a year with coronavirus, and we know how that impacts and has a toll on purchasing power. And if we can even go and find new pieces of software, if we have budget for it. And so I think what's interesting looking at the results, it's almost evenly split: 30% yes, 30% no, 40% hopefully. And again, I think that's kind of unique to the hopefully part. I think we're all hopefully getting on the other side of this as we speak, but it does play a big part into how we run businesses. So, but great, jumping right in. Obviously, we'll start right at the very beginning of it with your experience in sales. And I know we kind of talk all the time about how do we get into operations. Maybe you can kind of give us a little bit of insight too on how you got to where you are, because I know you have a little bit of a different background, not only operations, but with your experience, do you have any tips and advice on how do we even go ask for budget? We know we have problems that we need to solve for, but a lot of times those are rooted in how much money we can spend to solve them. How do you go and start to approach your boss, your CEO, CFO, VP of sales, in any parts of the world that you work in, to start talking about purchasing software?
Yeah, so of course, like any time that you are starting to even have the idea of purchasing or asking for money, normally the first thing that always comes to mind is just ROI, right? We want to know, how's this going to save us time? How's this going to save us money? But to your point, like, how do we actually quantify those things? And so sometimes we have budget, sometimes we don't, but either way, you have to allocate some sort of money to that. And so typically when I'm going through that evaluation period, it really comes down to the process that I follow, which is first things first, you want to make sure that you are really like understanding what is the problem that you're trying to solve. Just like make sure you name it and be clear about what that is. What is the impact negatively that's to the organization right now? what are you trying to do to solve that today? And then you start thinking through what are some potential ways to solve that. And when I think about some of those ways to solve, they typically break down into like three different categories. One being purchasing a new tool, two, purchasing a extension of your current tool, maybe there's a feature that you don't have access to, or three, which doesn't usually cost money at all, which is how can you leverage your current tool today that maybe you're just unaware of that is something that is available to you. So those are typically the three categories. And so from there, you'll decide which one of those paths you're going to walk down, but whichever one you walk down, you have to be super clear about the pros and cons of each of them. And so if you're purchasing a new tool, you're going to, of course, evaluate several tools, and then you're going to go through your pros and cons list of each of those. And so being very clear about what are the pros, what are the cons, it's really going to help you decide if said tool is the right one for you. And so once you get to that point where you're like, I know what I want to do, purchase a new tool, ask for money for a new feature, or stick with what I'm doing, then you're ready to make that recommendation because you've gone through that initial vetting process of what it is you're actually trying to solve for and some potential ways to solve for that.
I love it. I think it's the more you know, the better, obviously, and that sounds so cliche to say, but I think there's too often, and we look at how software now gets advertised to us either via email, via new videos, LinkedIn. You think about all the different ways that you get reached out to by by folks that are trying to sell to you. There's a lot of fun, flashy, really cool aspects of software. I
Mm-hmm.
think the one thing that every operations person here can probably empathize with is that we're all very detail oriented. We're all very tactically minded. And so most of the time we can cut through a lot of that and like, all right, objectively, will this thing do what it's supposed to do for us? Is it supposed to provide value? Not just is it cool and flashy as somebody else wanted. So we're really good at that. But I think there's times that just kind of gets the water gets a little muddy with it sometimes with the advertising piece of it.
Oh yeah.
Um, but thinking about selling this up to selling up to upper management, it's tough, right? Like we know this, especially if we're purchasing for ourselves in the RevOps world. Budgets are tight; they always will be, and they always have been. You have to go fight for every dollar you get. Piggybacking on that question from before, but have you found ways to successfully manage up and to get leadership? I think you and I, when we were kind of talking about this earlier, it's very much about the presence that you have, and it's not so much posturing, but the confidence you have and the problem that you have and how you're going to solve for it. But you're really curious when you're in that presentation mode and pitching software internally, any tips and tricks that you have when you're really having those hard conversations?
Yeah, I mean, indeed, it's a hard conversation, right? It's not always easy to ask for money, especially if it's not in the budget. And so the first thing is you want to make sure you've got a presentation. Like I'm not saying you have to have like a full-blown presentation, but it doesn't hurt to have some slides prepared. The second thing is when you're thinking about the audience that you are presenting to, make sure you are visualizing the problem from their perspective and making sure that you're answering the questions that you know or think that they might come up with so that you can have a better conversation around it because you've already anticipated the potential objections. So that alone will help the presentation go smoother. So when you're in that mode of actually creating the presentation, you're essentially going to build the presentation off of your analysis that you did initially. Again, what is the problem you're trying to solve for? What is the negative impact that it's having on the organization? What are you trying to do to solve it today? Because that's important. And then also, what's your recommendation? And again, depending on who your audience is, some audiences do want to know the vetting process that you went through, but some just want to know, okay, like just tell me the final one. Like, I trust you. You went through this vetting process. What is the thing that you think is going to help solve this problem? And so, with that, in that presentation, it's really important to make sure that you go through that pros and cons list that you went through because we all know too that when we purchase new tools, they're not always all butterflies and roses. Like there's going to be something that's a con about it. And so not to look at it through rose-colored glasses, but be honest about those cons and like how you're going to overcome those as you're implementing that new tool. Something that's really important not to overlook. And then from there, you can also go into, of course, the impact. And then from there, as you've done that analysis, it should be extremely clear about the ROI that you think that is going to impact the organization in a positive way.
I love it. Yeah, and I think you're spot on with the ROI side of it. I know we've had a lot of conversations about that. I'll always pause real quick, and folks that are in the webinar right now and watching, by all means, drop us a note either in the Q&A part or just in the chat if there's any questions specifically to how you would like to think about solving these problems and purchasing software. But going back to that ROI side of it, I think. This was really unique when you and I were catching up about this earlier. You know who your audience is, and if you're pitching ROI, know what makes them tick on ROI. If
Mhm.
it's someone in sales, and let's say that your boss is, the VP of sales or CRO, they have an ROI perspective of dollar in, dollar out, right? Like if I spend X amount of money, how much more is it going to make? If you're pitching to a CFO, not always the case because that could be more, dollar in, minute out. But when you think about how you go and push just the pure form ROI, whether it be a RevOps specific system or a sales tool or marketing tool, all those different perspectives, ROI is a big piece of that, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thinking about it as we continue to look in 2021, and there's a lot out there. Anything that you're specifically excited about, one, either trends in technology or just new tech in general that you're seeing. Would love to hear that because I think a lot of our folks that are on here that will watch the recording of this, they always want to keep their ear to the ground. What's the next best thing? What's Krystal thinking about buying? Not trying to get you into any more sequences or cadences to, to get you to purchase software. But
Yeah.
yeah, what excites you about 2021 with some of the tech that's out there and some things that you might be looking at?
Yeah, I mean, to your point earlier, there's so many tech options, and of course, I'm approached constantly of different types of tools that are going to help us. And so, really, some of the tools that have I've been approached with lately is really just like that aerial view of being able to like look at all of your processes from one vantage point. Because when it comes to tech stack and tools, a lot of times they can become very siloed, and so being able to like see everything it's so crucial. And with tech, it comes with its unique challenges of you are getting so much more data points, and there's APIs, and there's all these like little moving parts. And so being able to see all those moving parts from one place is something that can be really helpful. And when I talk to my team about this, we are what's the words I'm looking for? We know we're going to grow as a team, and so everything that we're building right now, like we know what we built, we know what could break or why something's breaking, but as our team grows, we're not going to be able to know, or they're not going to be able to know what we built because maybe we're not accessible at those moments for whatever reason. So those things are really important, is to be able to see that those things from that vantage point. Um, so those are the tools that I'm being approached with. But for right now, we really are super focused on leveraging our current tech stack. Like we have a really good tech stack, and I'm super proud of where we're at as an organization and the tech stack that we have today. And so they're such powerful tools. And so being able to leverage those today is definitely something that we're constantly exploring. And they're coming out with new features all the time that are free to us. And so being able to again leverage those tools.
Yeah, I love it. And I know the topic of this new year, new tech, and how we're going to evolve and evaluate new technology. But you bring up a really good point. There are oftentimes, and we hear this from our customers, just from our community too much. Hey, I'm going to go evaluate this technology because I need to go solve this problem. It's like, well, kind of do the inverse of that first. And you mentioned this earlier, evaluate your problem and see if you can solve it first for yourself. Like let's just because you want to throw money or tech at it, that's not always the best case. And even to your point of existing technology, we hear this so often. Hey, I'm switching from SalesLoft to Outreach, or Outreach to SalesLoft, or PandaDoc to DocuSign, or DocuSign to PandaDoc, and insert so many names here because data providers, e-signatures, ERPs, you name it, there's a competitor for it. And I think too often people you kind of get excited about, oh well, they said they can do this and this one doesn't do it. No one factors in the implementation time and
Oh
the
my gosh.
cost. Right, I know you and I were talking about that. What's your perspective of when you're looking at your current tech stack, and you should be a big fan of your own tech stack. Hopefully you probably purchased it and optimized it, but when you look at the evaluation process that way, any tips on like, all right, don't just give up on what you currently have and think that the grass is always greener to go buy something else, because sometimes it's not, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so it kind of comes back down to just being honest with yourself about like what are the pros and cons of switching to a new tool. And especially like when you're making a big switch like that, like yeah, like for me personally, there's been tools that I've considered switching to and or switching from, and I'm like, does that cost? Does it outweigh the benefit? I don't know. And so obviously those are the things you have to think about. But when it comes to when I am in those moments, I just want to be super thorough and not with just paying attention to like what's the time that's going to take to switch to a new tool, but I'm thinking of like I'm sending these companies surveys of like, okay, what does the Salesforce implementation look like to this? How much time does it take? What kind of support do I get? Right? Like you make sure that you're super, super thorough about like what is actually entailed. Because I have spoken with some vendors where they're like, implementation's a breeze. And I'm like, 8 weeks in. I'm like, what's going on? That is not what I was promised. So it's just a lesson learned of like, okay, you just have to be a little more thorough on the front end to really understand the time that's going to take to implement those tools. And do you have the right team to do that? Do you have do you need additional support or whatever those things are in order to help make that a smooth transition if you do make one?
Yeah, you're spot on. I think you mentioned the team part of it. That's so big. Like, do we have the right folks in place? Do we have the right capacity, all pun intended, to actually do our job that way? Do we have enough time to implement this new system, to fully adopt it the right way, to roll it out? I think the other thing, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier too, but you mentioned a book that you've read recently that talks about this as far as looking at the cost to make these big changes. You tell us about that book that you mentioned because I think it'll be very beneficial to especially the
Yeah.
folks that are watching this now.
Yeah. So there's this book called The Goal that I read, and it's a really good audio book experience too. So it's a fictional book, but it's actually based off of a true story. And so it's about this plant manager who has 90 days to turn around this manufacturing plant, or else they are going to shut their doors because they're not making any money. And so the company has invested a lot of money in like the state of the art, brand new technology to help produce more inventory for the manufacturing plant. And so the machinery is doing that, but the problem is that it's not generating more revenue. So there's a problem there. So basically what the book talks about is how this plant manager went through this process to inspect all of his business processes to really understand where the bottlenecks were, and so then he could help with efficiencies and increase that throughput so that they could have revenue. And so it's I've always thought in the way of like machines personally when it comes to like sales processes, because they all have moving parts, they all have if then statements, they all have some sort of outcome at the end of it. And so I always think of it like an assembly line. And so that is always running through my mind of like, okay, let's go walk the floor, quote unquote, make sure the assembly line is working the right way. Is it efficient? Is there a bottleneck? How long does it take to get point A, point B to point C? So that you can go in and find those ways to optimize. So it's a really good book. Highly recommend it. And again, it's super fun to listen to on audio.
I love it. I love it. Well, and we'll do everyone one better. If anybody in the webinar right now would like a copy of the book, raise your hand. Let us know. Either jump in the Slack and say, or jump in the chat or Slack and say that you do, and we'll be happy to get you a copy of it. I think you're spot on. Like when you think about the micro moments where you can save time and money on that sort of thing. But it all goes back to what you said earlier. How can I help understand what my problem is efficiently? Am I doing all of my right analysis firsthand to do that? One thing we talk about often is that how can we actually formalize a lot of this stuff when it comes to either software purchasing. We were kind of working behind the scenes together on a little bit, and we'll drop this in the chat now. But we did go ahead and help come up with a software purchasing proposal. A lot of folks don't take the time to put this down on paper and say, here's the problems that I'm trying to solve. I'll drop this in the chat right now for everyone, not just panelists, sorry, for panelists and attendees, so that everybody can see it. We'll get this out as well. If you register for the webinar, we can get you a copy of it. But I think what I take away from this, and I'll give credit where credit's due, one of our community members, Scott Haney, who runs RevOps over at Chili Piper, was one of the original creators of this type of document. And it's great because we forget sometimes to write all this stuff down, to slow down, myself included. What are we really trying to solve for? And if you take the time to write it down, get the right context, do the right Q&A of your own tech stack, you're going to be so much more beneficial. So when you think about formalizing these things, you said it best earlier. I think it's just a really good idea. We want to be able to share that, with the community, obviously. The one thing that I will say inside of that as well, again, you'll get a copy of this. Uh, there's an aspect of using this for evaluating the initial purchase, but I think more than anything, you should use this, on month 3 or month 6 or month 9, or absolutely on day 365 when you're up for renewal. And hey, did I achieve the success that I wanted to originally when I was evaluating the software? So um, absolutely, I think it's a great idea. I know you document a lot of this stuff too, like you said, formalize it and propose it and present it. It's just a great way to really make sure that you're in there. So yeah, getting organized. Um, Again, anybody that's on right now, if you have any questions, by all means, I know we've got a few minutes left. Happy to help answer any questions you have about evaluating software and technology. But we definitely want to be able to be here for you and get the answers you need. I'll switch gears a little bit just to have a little bit of fun. We always do this towards the end of every episode, a little bit of rapid fire, just fun things that are going on right now. The easiest question, because I think we're all mostly at home right now these days. What's your favorite thing that you're checking out on Netflix, Hulu, TV? What's piqued your interest so far right now?
Well, a lot of it. I love anything that's like not trash reality TV on Hulu, but I like to like watch reruns of like Shark Tank or American Ninja Warrior. I think there's like a new Weakest Link out there, and so just stuff like that. It's just kind of fun, lighthearted.
I love I love it. I'll flip that now into, we were talking about books earlier. Is there anything that you're reading? Obviously, the goal is something you've already listened to and read. Also, know you have a pretty busy day with school and everything else. What's on the reading list right now, or anything that you'd recommend?
On my reading list, well, nothing for fun really, because I'm basically reading economics books right now. So, um, but yeah, nothing that I can share right now that's exciting. But if I do, I will post it somewhere.
Absolutely. Well, like you said, the goal is a great book and a
Yes,
great listen to and a great read. So,
yes.
um, one of the things we always like to retrospect, and sort of as we wrap up a little bit. And again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to jump into it. But when you look back at your operations career, we didn't really dive too far deep into it, so we can kind of retro that as well, because I know you've shifted from sales into to operations. But when you look back over your operations career, what sort of advice would you give yourself? That kind of retrospectively looking at how you grew, how you were solving problems, and how you were evolving.
Yeah. So there's two things that come to mind. One, when I first joined this type of role about a year ago, I didn't really know of the community that was available to me. So that was something that I didn't tap into to about 6 or 7 months into my journey. And so that's one thing that I wish I would have done sooner, because since I've tapped into the community, I have learned so much and I've grown so much. And I think that our business processes have like just excelled so much faster. So that's one thing. But also, too, the second thing that comes to mind is really just like taking those moments to retrospect and turn around and say, wow, like look how far we have come and look how much we've accomplished in this last 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Because sometimes when you're always like staring up at the mountain, like it always feels like you're just so far, down. But if you look back, you're like, oh my gosh, like look how far I've come. I think that's really important, because sometimes you just feel like you're just like, man, I'm working so hard and I don't feel like I've gotten anywhere. But then you're like, actually, no, I have. So that's really important too.
I love that. Yeah, we don't do it nearly enough. And I'll tell you this: we installed this at Sonar mainly because I saw our engineering team doing it so early on. They have a every other week retro, and they spend they carve out an hour of their day and say, "All right, we just got done with this 2 week sprint. What went right? What went wrong? How are we going to fix and make these changes?" And I think we evolved that now. We do that on our sales team, our operations team. We do it kind of across the whole company, and it's so good because I think, to your point, sometimes we don't take enough time to like look back and like, wow, we accomplished this. We started here, and we didn't go direct line to here. We zigged and zagged and we did a lot of different things, but we got here. Let's make sure that we acknowledge the success that we have. So
Yeah.
I love that. And of course, we wouldn't be here without the community that we have. That everybody, a lot of community members joining right now. So you're spot on. So we do have one question. So we'll toss it out there. Sarah, thank you for asking. This is a fun one because it's very, there's some objective and subjective keys to it. What's the best practice, your best practices when it comes to differing opinions on evaluation? Example, marketing wants HubSpot, but sales operations wants Marketo. That can very much evolve. We don't have to necessarily answer for the HubSpot and the Marketo side. They might not like how we answer those, but what do you think of the differing opinions? And you do have different stakeholders. How do you evaluate their perspectives and really come to a consensus?
Yeah. So again, I'm always going to fall back to, again, like what are the pros and cons of those tools, right? Like I am a very objective person. It's very rare that I'm subjective because if you just look at the brass tacks of things, then it's a lot easier to make those like objective decisions because maybe there's some subjectivity as to like one might be more appealing than the other, but if you can just like break it down to like which tool is actually going to solve the challenges that we need. Because like in that example, you've got both tools, like they're both very powerful tools and they can both be very, very, very good for whatever you're trying to accomplish. But you can think about, okay, how is this tool going to help us 6 months from now, 12 months from now, in the future? Because if you start thinking about the future, then one might start having just more cons on the side of it just because it's not going to be able to scale with your organization. So that's something to always consider.
Yeah, I think you're so spot on with it. And I think the way that I've heard a lot, I can't remember who said it this way, but it was so eloquent. It was like, yes, you have an obligation to solve today's problems today, but make sure you prevent tomorrow's problems today and solve tomorrow's problems today. And if you keep that mindset, so yeah, if you're evaluating different marketing automation platforms, one, they're probably both going to solve for the problems that you have today. But if you add another zero to your headcount or another couple zeros to your revenue and your company continues to scale, are you also thinking forward enough that you're making the right purchase? Because remember, most of these contracts aren't month to month or even quarterly. They're annual or 2-year or 3-year deals. So you're signing up for a really long-term commitment with some software. Is it going to scale with your business?
Right.
And I think there's also, objectively, that is part of the responsibility of the person that's supposed to be selling it to you. They should be able to answer that question very eloquently for you and say, yes, this is why you need to purchase this today, and this is why you're going to benefit from it tomorrow and the next day and the next year. So, thinking forward like that. Great question, Sarah. That's a tough one because, like you said, there's a lot of strong opinions between different departments and different roles in those departments, and so it can be tough. But
Yeah,
um,
longevity is typically the deal breaker. So
it really is. I love it. Well, I know we're getting close to the top of time. If there's any last questions, let us know. But this is such a great episode. Again, we have so many folks in our communities and just friends of ours that join that are constantly evaluating software, and it's not easy. I think when you take the objective lens approach that you've talked about and do those pros and cons and document it and present it the right way, you get your ducks in a row, and you typically can create a really strong use case. So, Krystal, can't thank you enough for jumping in and sharing all of your insights. I know the community loves it, and we'll share this out with the community once the recording's ready, and along with the document that we have to help really look at that software. But yeah, can't thank you enough for joining. This is great.
yeah, my pleasure.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And for everybody that's still on, thank you all so much for jumping in. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. And also be on the lookout. We talk about technology evaluation. We're doing a survey right now of what technology are you looking at, are you using? And we're going to start providing some of those data points. People always ask, what is a similar company of my size using right now? So we'll be able to start answering those questions for you with your participation and your help on the survey. So Krystal, again, thank you so much. And we'll let everybody go. Have a great Thursday and talk to you soon. Take care.